Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into its own weight. Allow the day to loosen a little more with each breath, without needing to be fully set aside all at once. There is nowhere to reach tonight, and nothing to resolve before rest can begin. Only a garden path under moonlight, the softness of leaves overhead, and the quiet sense of something beautiful waiting further in. You do not need to hurry towards it. This is a story of gates, petals, still water, and silver light resting gently on stone. When you are ready, we begin. Tonight's story is called A Quiet Journey with Persephone Through the Midnight Garden. The garden begins with a pale wall under moonlight. Its stone is light enough to catch the silver glow, though not evenly. Some parts shine softly. Others remain in gentle shadow beneath trailing vine and leaf. The wall is not high in any forbidding way. It simply keeps what lies beyond a little more sheltered. Set into it is a narrow gate. Its shape is simple and graceful, framed by stone worn smooth in places, as though quiet hands have passed there many times before. A few vines have wandered across the upper edge. Near the latch, a small cluster of pale blossoms hangs almost still in the mild night air. You pause before it for a moment. Behind you, the night feels open. Ahead, everything feels more gathered, not closed off, only held a little more closely, as though the garden beyond has been keeping its own calm for hours already and has no need to announce itself. When the gate opens, it does so without harshness. Beyond it, a pale path curves gently out of sight between low growth and silvered leaves. Moonlight rests on the first stretch of stone, then fades more softly where branches begin to shape the way ahead. Nothing beyond the threshold looks formal. Nothing feels arranged for display. It feels lived with by the night itself. The air changes only slightly as you step nearer. It is still mild against the skin, yet touched now by something greener and fainter. Leaf, blossom, a trace of fruit. The cool breath of watered earth somewhere further inside. The scent is light. Still, it is enough to suggest depth beyond what can yet be seen. You place one hand against the gate and step through. At once, the wall behind you begins to quiet the outer world. The path lies ahead in pale curves. Vines soften the stone at your side. Leaves hold small pieces of moonlight above the beds beyond. And with that first step into the midnight garden, the night no longer feels wide and empty, but intimate, tended, and quietly waiting. The path leads you onward at once, though never with urgency. It curves gently between low garden beds and small trees whose branches reach further out than they first seemed from the gate. Here, the moonlight does not lie in one open sheet. It arrives in pieces. A silver patch on the stone, a softened line along the edge of a leaf, a pale glimmer resting on fruit half hidden among the branches. The path beneath your feet is smooth and even, not bright, just pale enough to hold the light where it falls, then let it fade again as the garden thickens around you. On either side, the planting has been kept in quiet order. Low herbs and trailing stems spill gently over the borders. Leaves overlap in layered shadows. Now and then, a white blossom catches the eye before disappearing again into the dimness beneath it. Above, the branches of the pomegranate trees spread more closely together. Their leaves hold the moon in small silver edges. Here and there, fruit hangs among them, dark and rounded, with only one side touched by light. Nothing moves much. A leaf may shift almost imperceptibly. A vine may rest against the wall in a different curve from the one beside it. But the garden does not feel stirred. It feels settled. The air is different here from the air outside the gate. Still mild, still soft, yet fuller now with leaf and blossom, and with that faint sweetness that comes from fruit left hanging in the night. It does not drift strongly. It simply remains around the path, close to the stone and low branches. You follow the curve without hurry. The wall is no longer always visible, though now and then a pale section appears between leaves, then slips away again as the path turns. That makes the garden feel both enclosed and open at once, sheltered by growth and stone, yet still lifted beneath the quiet sky above. As you move further in, the path seems less like something laid to lead you somewhere quickly, and more like something meant to be followed slowly, in the same way moonlight follows the edges of leaves. Nothing calls you forward, nothing holds you back. The garden simply continues ahead in silvered turns, and you move with it beneath branches and faint fruit scent, while the first gate falls gently out of mind behind you. After a little while, the path widens. The trees fall back just enough for a small courtyard to open before you, pale beneath the moon and quiet in a different way from the path behind. Low walls hold the space gently, not high enough to close it in, only enough to gather it. Within those boundaries, white flowers grow in still clusters, their petals almost luminous in the dim light. Some open low to the ground, some rise a little higher on slender stems. All of them seem to keep their brightness softly, without ever looking sharp. You step into the courtyard and slow. The paving here is smoother beneath your feet. The air feels cooler close to the stone, yet touched by a faint sweetness rising from the flowers themselves. It is not a heavy scent, just enough to soften the breath. At the center of the space, or a little off to one side, stands a shallow stone basin. Its rim catches a pale line of moonlight. Beyond that, the water within is dark and still, holding only the faintest suggestion of reflection. Trailing vines rest along one wall. Leaves cast delicate shadows that barely move. Nothing in the courtyard feels designed to impress. It feels kept. A place tended for beauty, certainly, but for quiet beauty. The kind that deepens when no one speaks and no wind rises to disturb it. You pause there for a few breaths. White petals, pale stone, still water, and silver light lying softly over all of it. The path behind you has already narrowed in feeling, even though it remains open where you came in. Ahead, another turning waits somewhere beyond the flowers, and the basin, though the courtyard asks for stillness before movement. And standing there in that small moonlit space, with blossom scent low in the air, and the water resting dark at its center, the garden feels less like somewhere you are entering, and more like somewhere gradually revealing its gentlest rooms. You move a little closer to the basin. Its stone rim is pale beneath the moon, worn smooth in places where hands must have rested before yours. The shape is simple and round enough to gather the space without drawing it too sharply into a center. Water lies within it, still enough to seem almost untouched. A few pale petals rest across the surface. Not many, just enough to catch the eye. Some have drifted close to the edge. Others remain nearer the middle, where the moonlight falls faintly and breaks against the dark water in softened fragments. You pause beside it. The air is cooler here, though only by a little. The difference comes from the water and the stone around it, which hold the night in their own way and return it gently against the skin. Nothing in the basin moves unless the light itself seems to move. A reflection loosens. A pale shape forms, then thins again. The petals remain where they have settled, as though even they have been drawn into the quiet of the courtyard. One hand rests lightly against the rim. The stone feels cool beneath your fingers. Smooth, steady, the sort of surface that has held moonlight, water, and silence for many nights before this one. Around the basin, the flowers remain low and white in their beds. Their scent stays close to the ground. The trailing vines along the wall cast faint shadows nearby, barely shifting at all. The whole courtyard seems gentler at its center because of this still water. It asks for nothing more than a quiet pause beside it, while the petals float quietly and the moon rests in broken silver over the dark. After a few breaths, the basin no longer feels like an object placed in the courtyard. It feels like part of the same hush. Stone, water, petals, and moonlight all seem held together, so softly that the space around you seems to slow even further, as though the garden is letting you linger here before it leads you on. Beyond the courtyard, the path narrows again. It passes the last of the white flowers, curves beside the basin, and comes to a short flight of shallow steps leading down into the next part of the garden. They are broad steps, worn smooth in the middle. Moonlight rests along their edges, while the centers lie in softer shadow where leaves and vine have drawn their patterns across the stone. You pause at the top for a moment. From here, the lower garden looks dimmer, not darker in any troubling way, only more gathered. The growth below lies closer together. Branches seem to lean further over the paths. Leaf and shadow hold the air a little more closely there. You begin to descend. Each step is low enough to take without effort. The movement is gentle, unhurried, more like sinking into deeper quiet than traveling anywhere new. The stone beneath your feet feels cooler here than it did above. Along one side, a low wall follows the steps down, pale where the moon catches it, softened elsewhere by trailing vines and leaves that spill over in loose, dark shapes. On the other side, the garden thickens, with branches and narrow stems gathering in the dimness and making the terrace below feel hidden until you are almost within it. The air changes slightly as you descend. A fresher coolness rises from below, touched by leaf and watered earth, and something faintly sweet from fruit still hanging somewhere deeper inside the garden. The scent remains light, yet enough to tell you that the lower terrace keeps its own atmosphere, separate from the courtyard above. By the time you reach the final step, the first courtyard has already begun to feel further away than it is. The white flowers remain above. The basin remains there in its pale circle of stillness. But down here, the garden has changed in character. The garden feels lower and more enclosed. The branches feel nearer. The moonlight comes in thinner pieces through the leaves. And standing now at the foot of the steps, with the path continuing softly ahead between deeper shadow and silvered leaves, you feel the garden drawing you inward once again, not by urging you forward, but by becoming quieter the further in you go. The path opens gently into the lower terrace. Here, the garden feels more sheltered than above, though the sky is still visible between the branches. Pomegranate trees stand in quiet clusters along the terrace, their leaves holding small fragments of moonlight and their fruit hanging dark among the silvered foliage. Nothing in this part of the garden feels arranged to be admired all at once. It reveals itself slowly. A branch bending over the path, a rounded fruit touched on one side by light, a pale strip of stone between tree roots and low planting beds. The air carries a different scent here, still soft, still mild, yet richer now with leaf and fruit, and with that faint sweetness that gathers where the branches hold their shadows close. You follow the terrace path a little further in. On one side, a low wall runs beside the orchard space, pale beneath the moon and softened by trailing growth. On the other, the trees stand closer together, their branches overlapping just enough to make the terrace feel enclosed without ever closing it in. Some fruit hangs high and still. Some hangs lower, nearer the line of sight, dark and full beneath the leaves. Their color is hard to name in this light. Not red exactly, not black, only deep and rounded, with the moon resting along one curve and leaving the rest to shadow. Now and then, the path widens just enough to allow a pause. A low stone edge appears beneath one tree. A pale section of paving catches more moonlight than the rest. A branch leans out as though offering fruit without asking to be touched. You stop there for a moment. The terrace is very still. No leaf stirs beyond the smallest suggestion of movement. No fruit swings on its stem. Even the air seems content to rest among the trees rather than pass through them. From here, the courtyard above feels distant already. The basin, the white flowers, the descending steps, all of them remain behind you now, while this lower garden gathers itself in silver leaf, dark fruit, pale stone, and hush. And standing beneath the pomegranate branches, with moonlight touching the fruit in small, quiet glints, you feel Persephone's presence not as a story being told, but as something held in the garden itself in its abundance, its stillness, and in the calm beauty of what ripens quietly in the night. Beyond the lower terrace, the path narrows again. It passes between the trees more closely now, with branches reaching further overhead and drawing the moonlight into thinner, broken pieces. Leaves gather above in layers, and among them the fruit hangs dark and still, some high, some low, some almost hidden until a small curve of silver finds them. The path remains pale beneath your feet, not bright, only light enough to guide the eye where the terrace continues between trunk, shadow, and low planting. Moonlight reaches it in scattered shapes, touching one stone, then another, then disappearing beneath the thicker cover of leaves. You move more slowly here. The branches make the garden feel held in a different way from the walls. Above you, they form a kind of living ceiling, open in places, gathered in others, so that the night sky appears only in small, calm pieces between leaf and fruit. The orchard feels closer here, more inward, with the branches holding the path in a softer kind of enclosure. A pomegranate hangs near the path at shoulder height. Its curved surface catches a little moonlight on one side, while the rest remains in shadow. Nearby, another hangs deeper within the leaves, darker and less distinct, felt almost before it is clearly seen. None of them seems placed for display. They simply remain where they have ripened, held quietly among the branches. The air is different under the trees. It carries the faint sweetness of fruit more clearly here, mixed with leaf, and the mild coolness that gathers where branches hold back the open sky. The scent does not thicken. It stays light and close, as though it belongs to the shaded path itself rather than drifting outward into the rest of the garden. Now and then, a leaf shadow crosses the stone beneath your feet. A silver edge glimmers above. A darker branch stretches over the way. The whole path feels softened by what grows over it, and with each step, the orchard seems to draw a little nearer around you without ever becoming heavy. You follow the curve of the path in silence. The wall is no longer visible, and the courtyard has fallen gently out of sight. Only the pale way ahead, the branches above, and the dark fruit resting among silvered leaves. And as you walk beneath them, with the moon caught in fragments overhead, and the faint sweetness of fruit held in the air, the garden begins to feel less like somewhere you are passing through, and more like something gently inclining around you, keeping its calm close as it leads you further in. Before long, the path comes alongside a narrow channel of water. It runs quietly between the planted beds and the edge of the stone path held within a low carved border that catches the moonlight here and there. The water is almost perfectly still. Only the faintest gleam lies along its surface. A pale line, a soft reflection, nothing more. You walk beside it slowly. Leaves lean over the edge in places. A few petals have fallen near the water and remain where they settled. Now and then, the moon appears in broken fragments along the channel, then slips away again beneath the shadow of branch and stem. The air feels cooler here, not sharply so, only touched by the quiet presence of water moving through the garden, even when it seems hardly to move at all. The planted beds on either side seem softer here. Their edges are less defined. Leaves overlap. Stems bend into one another. White flowers appear now, and then among darker growth, catching the eye for a moment before the moonlight shifts elsewhere. The channel continues beside you with the same calm certainty. It does not draw attention to itself. It simply accompanies the path, keeping its own narrow thread of silver between stone and root, between blossom and shadow. Once, you pause and look down. The water holds a dim reflection of leaves overhead, not clearly, only enough to make the surface feel deeper than it first seemed. The stone lip beside it is smooth beneath the hand if touched, cooler than the path, quietly worn. When you begin walking again, the garden seems to move in two gentle lines beside you, the path continuing forward beneath your feet, and the water continuing beside it, pale and narrow, carrying the same hush a little further into the night. A little further on, the path passes beneath an arbor. It rises lightly over the stone, more grown than built, with trailing vines drawn across its frame and leaves hanging down in soft, uneven lengths. Moonlight reaches through it in broken patterns. A pale shape rests on the path. A strip of silver touches one leaf. Then shadow gathers again where the growth is thicker overhead. You slow as you enter. The air feels different beneath the arbor. Not closed in, only gentler. The leaves above soften the open sky and turn the path into something quieter, half garden and half hidden room. A few flowers hang among the vines. Some are open. Some remain curled in shadow. Their scent is faint but close here, held under the leaves rather than drifting outward. The path below is patterned with leaf shadow. Nothing moves enough to disturb it. A stem hangs lower than the rest near one side. A vine twists across the upper frame in a darker line. Somewhere above, small openings still show pieces of sky between the growth, but only in narrow fragments now. You pass beneath slowly. The arbor does not feel like a structure placed to divide the garden sharply. It feels more like a soft threshold, the kind that changes the atmosphere before it changes the space. By the time you reach the middle of it, the moonlight behind you already feels different from the moonlight ahead. Behind you, the moonlight has been softened by leaves and flowers. Ahead, it waits a little more openly beyond the arbor. Then the path begins to open again, while the arbor stays behind in quiet leaf shadow, as though the garden had lowered its branches for a while, simply to guide you through one more gentle layer of stillness. Beyond the arbor, the path opens beside a pale wall washed softly in moonlight. At its base stands a low stone seat, simple and smooth, set where the garden seems to pause of its own accord. You come to it slowly. The wall behind it holds the light differently from the leaves. It does not shimmer or break it, it keeps it still. Across that pale surface, the shadows of branches lie in delicate patterns. A few leaves are outlined clearly. Others fade into softer shapes that barely seem separate from the stone. You stop there for a moment. The seat has kept the night's coolness. Not cold, only calm beneath the hand, as though it has been waiting quietly in this same patch of silver light for many hours already. Nearby, one branch leans out over the wall. A few leaves catch the moon. A dark fruit hangs further back, half hidden and motionless among them. Nothing in this part of the garden asks to be noticed quickly. The stillness does the work instead. The wall, the seat, and the branch shadow resting against the stone all seem arranged without effort. You remain there for a few breaths. The air is mild and barely moving. The scent of leaf and flower lingers faintly, with the softer sweetness of fruit still held somewhere behind it. The path ahead has not disappeared. It continues beyond the seat and bends further inward. Yet the pause feels natural here, as though the garden wanted one small place where movement could loosen for a while before beginning again. When you go on, you do so gently. The stone seat remains by the pale wall. The branch shadow keeps its soft shape across the moonlit surface. And behind you, that little resting place seems to hold its quiet exactly as it was, waiting within the garden like a thought not yet fully spoken. A little beyond the stone seat, another gate appears. It is lighter than the first one, not set so firmly into a wall, not framed so clearly in stone. It seems almost to have grown there, shaped by slender metalwork and climbing branches drawn together in one quiet opening. Moonlight rests along its upper curve. Leaves have found their way through the pattern in places, softening the shape without hiding it. A few pale blossoms remain among them, still enough that they seem part of the gate itself. You slow as you come near. The path beneath your feet narrows slightly here. The air is no cooler, yet something in it has changed. The garden beyond the opening seems more hidden, more inward, as though the spaces behind you have already fallen back, and this one belongs to a deeper layer of the night. You pause for a moment before passing through. Nothing about the gate feels closed. Nothing resists. It marks a threshold, but a gentle one, the kind that shifts the atmosphere more than the step itself. Beyond it, you can already see a softer patch of ground where the moon reaches further in. Leaves gather low along the edge of the path. Branches rise and fall in pale shadow beyond. When you move through, the change is quiet but immediate. The path ahead feels more secluded. The garden seems to draw closer around it, though never tightly. The sky remains above, but in smaller silver pieces between leaves and branch. Behind you, the seat by the pale wall has already begun to feel more distant. The softened shadows and cool stone remain there, but the gate has changed the way the garden holds you now. The air carries leaf and blossom more closely. A faint sweetness lingers beneath it, and as you continue on through that lighter threshold, with moonlight touching the curved edge behind you and a quieter part of the garden opening ahead, the journey seems to deepen without any need for effort at all. Beyond the gate, the path opens into a small clearing. The change is gentle. One moment the garden is gathered close around you. The branches have fallen back just enough to let more moonlight reach the ground. Trees stand further apart here. Their trunks rise quietly from pale earth and stone, with fruit hanging higher among the leaves and silver light resting more fully between them. The space does not feel exposed. It feels hidden in a different way, as though the garden has opened inward rather than outward. You move into the clearing slowly. The ground beneath your feet is smoother here, with wider stretches of pale paving and softer planting at the edges. Low growth borders the open space, and at its center stands a shallow stone basin, or perhaps a low circular bed where leaves and pale blossoms gather in the moonlight. Nothing in the clearing asks to be admired all at once. Its stillness is enough. Moonlight lies more openly here than it did beneath the arbor. It reaches the ground in quiet silver sheets. It touches the trunks, the lower branches, the pale stone near the center, then fades softly where shadow gathers again beneath the leaves. The air has changed too. The fruit scent remains, though lighter now in the more open space. Leaf and blossom linger beneath it. Everything feels mild, still, and held at just the right distance. You pause there for a few breaths. From here, the path behind has already softened into the garden. The wrought branches of the gate are no longer clearly seen. The stone seat by the pale wall has fallen further back into memory. What remains is this clearing. Trees spaced in calm intervals. Moonlight resting low across the ground. A quiet center held within the orchard. It feels like a place the garden has kept to itself. And standing there in that more open silver light, with branches lifting above and pale stone holding the hush beneath, you feel the journey drawing itself nearer to the heart of the garden itself. Beyond the clearing, the path narrows once more. It does not turn sharply. It simply draws inward again, as though the garden has opened for a while and is now gathering itself back into softer, quieter lines. Petals lie across the stone, not enough to hide the path, only enough to soften it. Some have fallen in small pale drifts along the edges. Others rest alone in the middle, touched by moonlight on one side and shadow on the other. You walk through them slowly. The path feels gentler here, not because it has changed beneath your feet, but because the petals alter the way it is seen. The pale stone no longer lies plain and open. It is broken now by soft shapes, by scattered curves of white, by the quiet impression of flowers having let go and come to rest exactly where they fell. On either side, the planting grows low and close. Leaves spill lightly across the borders. A few blossoms remain above on their stems, while others have already drifted down to join the path below. The moonlight catches their edges now, and then leaves them again as branches thin and gather overhead. The air carries a faint sweetness here, not fresh in the way of newly opened flowers, softer than that. A fragrance already half settled into the garden floor, into the night air close to the ground, into the stillness that seems to deepen with every step. You do not hurry. There would be no reason to. The petals seem to ask for a slower pace, a quieter eye, a little more room for pause between one step and the next. Now and then, one petal rests alone where the moon reaches more fully. Another lies half beneath a leaf shadow. A cluster gathers near the edge of the path where trailing stems bend low above it. None of it feels arranged. That is part of what makes this section of the garden so calm. The petals have fallen where they settled. The path has accepted them. The moonlight meets them gently and moves on. And as you continue, with pale shapes scattered beneath your feet and the scent of flower and leaf resting low in the air, the garden begins to feel softer under every step, as though the way ahead is no longer made only of stone and planting, but of quiet things gradually settling into place. The path turns gently beside a pale wall. Here, the stone rises a little higher than the low borders you passed before, and its surface holds the moonlight in a quieter way. Broad leaves climb across it in layered shadows, some pressed close to the wall, others reaching outward just enough to soften its outline. You move beside it slowly. The path feels narrower here, not because it has been made smaller, but because the wall keeps one side of the garden close while the planting on the other side leans in with its own soft growth. Between stone and leaf, the way ahead feels more sheltered and inward. The fig leaves change the light. They are broader than the pomegranate leaves, deeper in shadow, with edges that catch the moon in larger, quieter shapes. Their shadows lie across the wall in uneven patterns that seem almost still enough to have been painted there. The air holds a different scent in this part of the garden. Leaf first followed by the faintest trace of fruit, richer than before, but still light in the night air. Beneath both, the stored coolness of the wall rests close to the path and touches the skin when you pass near it. Now and then, a branch reaches a little further out. A broad leaf hovers over the stone. A darker cluster gathers near the upper part of the wall. Somewhere among the leaves, fruit remains hidden more than seen, held back in shade, and suggested more by scent and shadow than by shape. You walk on without hurry. The petals from the last stretch of path have thinned now, though one or two remain near the edge where wall and planting almost meet. Their pale softness against the stone only deepens the feeling that this part of the garden has not been arranged all at once, but gathered slowly over many nights. The wall keeps its calm at your side. The leaves hold their shadows. The path continues between stone, growth, and silvered air. And as you move beside that shaded fig wall, with broad leaves resting against pale stone and the faint richness of fruit low in the night around you, the garden feels older somehow, more layered, as though you are passing not only through planted beauty, but through a place where shade itself has been allowed to ripen into quiet. After the fig wall, the path opens again, not into brightness, into depth. A pool lies ahead beneath a stand of cypress, its surface dark enough to gather the night almost completely. The trees rise straight and quiet above it, their shadows falling long across the stone and reaching into the water without breaking it. You slow as you come near. Moonlight reaches only part of the pool. A pale shape rests near one edge. The rest remains darker, holding reflection and shadow so closely together that they seem almost the same thing. The air is cooler here, not sharply, only with that calm freshness that gathers near still water and shaded stone. The cypress changes the feeling of the garden. The pomegranate trees held moonlight in fragments. These trees hold it differently, more sparingly, more deeply. Their dark branches rise rather than spread, and because of that, the space around the pool feels quieter, more vertical, as though the night has been drawn upward as well as inward. You come to the low stone edge and pause there. The coping is smooth beneath the hand if touched, cooler than the path behind you, steady and faintly damp with night air. The pool does not ask for anything more than a quiet pause beside it. It only keeps what the garden gives it. It keeps a narrow strip of moon, the dark shape of cypress, a softened suggestion of leaf and sky. Nothing stirs the surface. If there is movement at all, it is so slight that it belongs more to the changing light than to the water itself. Around the pool, the garden grows quieter without seeming empty. The fig wall has fallen behind you. The petal path has thinned into memory. Here there is only dark water, pale stone, and the still presence of the trees. Even the scent is different. Leaf remains, so does that faint trace of fruit from the deeper garden. But near the pool, those softer sweetnesses are gentled by water and shadow until they seem to rest lower in the air. You remain there for a few breaths. The cypress stands above the pool. The moon rests in part of it. The darker water keeps the rest. And in that shaded stillness, with the garden gathered more closely than before, and the trees holding their silence overhead, the journey seems to pass into a deeper kind of beauty. One less bright, less fragrant, less immediately visible, yet calmer for all of that, as though you have come to a place where the garden keeps its most inward quiet in water and shadow together. Beyond the pool, the path does not continue along the same edge for long. Instead, it comes to a narrow crossing where a few pale stones lie set just above the water, or perhaps a slim bridge has been laid from one side to the other, so lightly that it seems part of the garden rather than something built to interrupt it. You slow as you come near. The water lies dark beneath the crossing. Moonlight reaches it only in fragments. A pale shape here, a softened gleam there. The rest remains gathered into shadow beneath the cypress and the quiet edge of stone. The first step across asks for nothing more than care, not because the crossing feels uncertain, only because the whole garden has grown quiet enough for each movement to be felt a little more clearly now. The stone beneath your foot is cool, smooth too, worn by water, weather, and long still nights. Below it, the pool keeps its own dark calm, holding reflection without ever fully giving it back. You continue slowly, one step and then the next. The water below does not stir. It only receives the pale shapes above it, the edge of moonlight, the shadow of cypress, the faint suggestion of leaves, and keeps them in that softened depth where nothing seems sharp enough to disturb the hush. Halfway across, you pause for a moment. From here, the garden feels held between two kinds of stillness. Below, the dark water. Above, the open night in narrow pieces between branch and tree. The crossing itself seems to belong to both, not entirely path, not entirely pause, only a quiet passage over something deeper and more inward than the stones around it. The air is cooler here, a fine coolness rising from the pool and resting lightly against your hands and face. The richer scent of leaf and fruit has softened again near the water, so that everything feels cleaner, dimmer, and more remote from the brighter parts of the garden left behind. When you move on, you do so without haste. The remaining stones or the narrow bridge itself carry you gently to the other side. There is no sound beyond the faintest shift of your own movement and the quiet sense of water below, dark and undisturbed. By the time you step back onto the path, the pool already feels changed behind you. It does not feel left behind entirely, only crossed. And with that crossing, the garden seems to draw you inward once more, as though the water had marked a softer threshold than any gate or wall, and you have passed over it into a stiller part of the night. Beyond the crossing, the path enters a grove where the branches hang lower. Fruit rests among them in quiet clusters, dark against the leaves, with moonlight touching only one curve here and there before falling away again. The trees do not crowd the way. They gather around it gently, close enough to hold the space, open enough to let the silver light reach through in softened pieces. You move beneath them slowly. The air is richer here than it was beside the pool. Not heavier, only fuller. Leaf, fruit, and mild night warmth remain close to the path, as though the grove keeps them near rather than letting them drift. Some branches bend over the stone. Others lift a little higher, so the moon can reach the leaves from above. Now and then, fruit hangs almost at eye level, still and rounded, dark enough that its color is felt more than seen. Nothing in the grove seems arranged. That is part of its calm. The fruit remains where it ripened. The leaves hold their quiet silver edges. The path continues beneath them without asking for anything more than a gentle pace. You walk on. Moonlight touches one branch, then another. A shadow gathers beneath a cluster of leaves. Further in, another tree stands with its fruit half hidden, the shapes only gradually revealing themselves as your eyes adjust to the deeper quiet of the grove. The scent is faint but clear. A little sweetness, a little leaf coolness, and the soft trace of earth beneath it all. Nothing pushes forward. The whole space feels self-contained, as though the grove has reached its own still ripeness and no longer needs to become anything more than it already is. You pause there for a few breaths, fruit above, leaves around, moonlight resting in fragments over the path below. The garden has grown more inward again, though not smaller. It feels gathered rather than narrowed, with each tree keeping its place, and each hanging fruit adding to the sense of quiet abundance. And standing there beneath those branches, with dark fruit held among silvered leaves, and the path continuing softly through them, you feel Persephone's presence again in the garden's calm richness, not as something spoken aloud, but as something rooted in stillness, fruit, and moonlit growth. After the grove, the branches begin to fall back, not all at once, only enough for the path to open into a quieter, paler space where more of the sky can be seen above you. A marble bench stands there. Its surface is pale beneath the moon, almost silver in places. A quiet coolness seems to rise from the stone itself. It is set near a low wall at the edge of the garden, where the leaves have drawn away just enough for the open sky to feel present again without making the space feel exposed. You come to it slowly. Behind you, the fruit grove remains in its gathered dimness. Ahead, the garden is quieter still, as though this small open place has been kept for pause rather than passage. The bench simply waits there in the moonlight, calm and pale, with the garden gathered softly around it. A few branches lean in from one side. Leaves cast faint shadows across the stone. Beyond the low wall, the night continues, though only as distance now, held gently at the edge of the garden. You pause beside it. The air gathers more closely here where the branches have drawn back. Not cold, only lighter. The scent of fruit has thinned. Flower and leaf remain, but more softly than before, as though the open sky has given them more room to settle. One hand rests against the marble. The stone is smooth and cool beneath your fingers, touched by moonlight along its upper edge and shaded below. It feels older than the path, older even than the fruit hanging in the grove behind you, as though it has kept the same quiet beneath many clear nights. You remain there for a few breaths. The low wall beside it holds a pale line of silver. The branches behind you keep their darker hush. Above, the sky opens in a wider piece than it has for some time, and the moonlight reaches the ground more fully here, spreading across the paving in soft, even light. The garden feels different in this place, still enclosed, still hidden, yet more open to the night above, as though it has brought you inward by degrees only to offer this one small clearing of sky before drawing you further on. When you continue, you do so gently. The marble bench remains beneath the open moonlight. The low wall keeps its pale edge. The grove behind you gathers back into shadow and fruit. And the garden, having widened for a moment around that cool stone seat and the quiet sky above it, seems to hold the pause within itself like one more soft breath before the journey deepens again. Beyond the marble bench, the path continues for a little way in open moonlight. Then, almost without warning, it draws inward again. The change is gentle. A few pale branches lean down from either side of the way, bending low enough to form a soft arch above the path. They are not cut or trained into place. They seem to have grown towards one another over many quiet seasons until the opening beneath them became part of the garden's shape. Moonlight catches along the upper curves. Some twigs shine silver for a moment. Some remain in softer shadow. Here and there, a blossom still clings among the leaves, pale and delicate against the dimness gathered behind it. You slow as you come near. The path beneath the arch is no different in stone from the path behind you, yet it feels altered all the same. The branches lower the space around you. The garden no longer opens upward quite so freely. The sky is still there beyond the leaves, but in smaller pieces now, seen between stems and blossom rather than across the wider clearing you have just left. You pause for a moment at the threshold. The air feels closer here. Not heavy, only gathered. Leaf, blossom, and the faint sweetness of fruit remain in it, though softer than before, as though the arch has drawn all the scents together and let them rest low over the path. The marble bench behind you has already begun to feel more distant. Its pale stone still keeps the moonlight somewhere behind your shoulder, but here the garden has folded back into itself again. When you pass beneath the branches, they do not touch you. They only come near enough to be felt. A leaf shadow falls across the stone. A pale bloom hangs to one side. A slender stem curves overhead where the moon reaches it most clearly. For a few steps, the garden feels almost chamber-like, though made only of living things, not enclosed by wall and roof, held instead by branch, leaf, and flower. That changes the movement of the path. You do not follow it in quite the same way as before. The garden seems to draw you through this softer opening by degrees, with no sense of crossing anything formal, only the feeling that you have passed from one kind of stillness into another, finer, and more hidden than the one behind. By the time you emerge beneath the far side of the arch, the path ahead already feels different. The moonlight lies lower there. The planting gathers more closely. The hush has deepened without becoming heavy, and the pale branches behind you remain in their curved stillness, as though the garden had lowered them for a while, simply to guide you beneath one more living threshold before leading you on. Beyond the arch, the path opens into a smaller court. It does not widen dramatically. It simply gathers itself into a space that feels held on all sides by low walls, quiet planting, and the calm arrangement of stone beneath the moon. The first thing you notice is the fruit. Dark pomegranates rest in shallow bowls set along a ledge at one side of the court, with more gathered near the base of the wall where a few leaves have fallen among them. The bowls are simple, their rims pale in the moonlight, their curved interiors holding fruit and shadow together, so softly that neither stands out from the other. You move further in. The paving here is smooth beneath your feet, with silver light lying across it in wide, still patches. Along the edges, leaves and trailing stems soften the lines of the stone. Nothing in the court feels formal or ceremonial. It feels composed in the way a garden becomes composed when it has been tended for a long time and then left to rest in its own balance. One of the bowls catches your eye for a moment. The fruit within it is dark and rounded, touched by moonlight only along one side, while the rest remains gathered into shadow. A single leaf lies beside it on the ledge. Further along, another bowl holds fewer fruits, spaced loosely enough that the stone beneath can still be seen between them. That small space only deepens the stillness, as though the court has no need to fill every surface in order to feel complete. The air carries a faint sweetness here, not strong, only closer than before. Fruit, leaf, and the mild coolness of stone seem to meet and settle low within the court, where the walls keep the night from spreading too widely, and the planting softens every edge that might otherwise feel bare. You pause for a few breaths. The low walls hold the space without closing it in. Branches lean near from beyond them. Moonlight rests quietly on bowls, ledge, paving, and leaf. Nothing asks to be admired. The fruit has simply been gathered and left there, as though this inner place needed no ornament beyond what the garden itself had already ripened. Standing in that enclosed court, with dark pomegranates resting in their pale bowls, and the moonlight touching them just enough to show their weight and shape, you feel the garden becoming more intimate again. The garden feels more inward here. And as the path continues beyond the ledge and low wall, half hidden by leaf and shadow, the court remains behind in perfect calm, holding its fruit, its silvered stone, and its quiet abundance without asking for anything more. Beyond the court, the path narrows again. It does not close in sharply. It passes instead through a soft veil of hanging blossom and trailing vine, where pale flowers dip low enough to brush the moonlight and turn it gentler before it reaches the ground. You slow as you come near. The flowers hang in loose strands across the opening, with leaves gathered among them and stems falling in quiet curves from above. Some blossoms are fully open, others remain half-folded, their pale shapes only partly seen against the dimness behind them. Moonlight moves through them in fragments. A petal catches silver for a moment. A leaf throws a delicate shadow across the path. Then the light shifts again, and the whole veil seems to soften back into one living curtain of flower, vine, and shadow. You pass through carefully. Nothing brushes you harshly. The blossoms only come near enough to be felt at the edge of awareness, as though the garden had lowered them here not to bar the way, but to soften it. The scent is closer in this part of the path. Not stronger exactly, only nearer. Flower and leaf remain suspended in the mild night air, held under the hanging growth where the breeze does not reach far enough to carry them away. The path beneath feels quieter for it, as though each step has entered a place where even the moonlight has learned to move more softly. For a few moments, the garden feels almost room-like again, not because of wall or roof, but because blossom and vine have gathered the space so closely. The air is open above, yet the path beneath the flowers seems gathered into its own stillness, with petals overhead, leaf shadow below, and silver light resting lightly between them. You continue on without hurry. Behind you, the pomegranate court has already begun to soften into distance. Ahead, the path remains partly veiled, partly revealed, with hanging flowers thinning here, and thickening there as the garden draws you through one more gentle layer of hidden beauty. And by the time you reach the far side, with petals still pale in the moonlight behind you, and the path opening again ahead, the veil of blossoms feels less like something you have passed through than something the garden has briefly placed around you, simply to deepen the hush before leading you on. Beyond the hanging blossoms, the path opens onto a round pool. Its shape gathers the space at once, not sharply, not formally, only with that quiet completeness that comes when water, stone, and moonlight seem naturally meant for one another. You move nearer. The rim is smooth and pale beneath the moon, worn softer in places where time and weather have touched it again and again. Within it, the water lies almost perfectly still, dark enough to hold shadow and reflection together, yet light enough at the surface for the moon to rest there in a softened circle. A few petals float across it, some lie near the edge, some have drifted further in. They do not move visibly, yet nothing about them feels fixed. They seem simply to have come to rest where the water received them. The air is cooler beside the pool, not by much, only with that fine freshness that rises from still water at night and settles close to the skin. You pause there for a few breaths. Moonlight rests on the surface in broken silver. Petals hold their pale quiet. The stone rim gathers all of it without calling attention to itself. Around the pool, the garden seems to draw inward. The blossoms behind you have already softened into scent and shadow. The path ahead is not yet fully seen. What remains most clearly is the water, with its round stillness holding the center of the space. Nothing asks to be interpreted. Nothing asks to be admired. The pool simply keeps what the garden has given it: moonlight, petals, shadow, and the faint suggestion of leaves leaning somewhere above. If you look a little longer, the reflections seem to loosen. A pale shape forms. A darker one settles beneath it. Then both soften again into the same quiet surface. The petals remain where they are. The water remains untroubled. And standing there beside that round pool, with the night air cool above the stone and the moon resting in a dim circle at its center, you feel the garden slow once more, as though every path and branch has been leading not only inward, but towards this deeper kind of stillness where even the water seems content to dream. Not far from the round pool, a low seat rests beside a pale wall. It is placed simply, almost as though it had always belonged there, and the garden had grown around it without ever disturbing its place. Moonlight reaches the wall more fully here. It lies across the stone in a soft, even wash, while the shadows of leaves rest over it in faint patterns that seem barely to move. The pool remains close by, though now it is felt more through its coolness and quiet presence than through its shape alone. You come to the seat slowly. Its surface has kept the night's coolness. Not cold, only smooth and calm beneath the hand, with that same stored stillness the basin rims and garden ledges have held all through the journey. You pause there for a while. The wall behind the seat gives the space a different kind of hush. Not enclosure exactly, more a gentle backing, something pale and steady against which moonlight, leaf shadow, and the faintest movement of the garden can all settle without effort. The air remains mild. Flower scent drifts only lightly now. The sweetness of fruit has softened into the background. Nearest is the cool breath of the pool and the faint greenness of leaves resting in the night. Nothing in this part of the garden asks for movement. The path beyond is still there. You can feel it continuing somewhere ahead between low growth and pale stone. Yet beside the wall, near the round pool, and under the quiet fall of moonlight, the pause feels complete in itself, as though the garden has made one more place where stillness may gather before the final inward turn. You rest your hand lightly on the seat or the wall. Stone beneath the fingers, moonlight on the surface, and leaf shadow crossing it, so softly that it seems part of the wall itself. The whole space feels held in balance. The round pool behind you, the pale wall beside you, the softened path ahead. Nothing stands forward. Nothing asks to be chosen over anything else. After a few breaths, the garden feels complete enough to rest in already. And that is what makes this pause so gentle. It does not interrupt the journey, it deepens it. When you move on, you do so without effort. The seat remains by the moonlit wall. The pool keeps its cool stillness nearby. The shadows of leaves stay where they have fallen. And behind you, that pale, quiet corner of the garden seems to keep its calm undisturbed, like a place that has already learned how to hold rest before sleep fully arrives. Beyond the seat, the path continues. It does not announce itself. It simply remains there, pale beneath the moon, curving gently between low leaves and quiet stone as though it has been waiting all this time for the moment when you are ready to follow it further in. You move towards it slowly. The wall beside the seat falls back by degrees. The round pool remains behind in its cool stillness. Ahead, the garden gathers itself once more. The path is narrower here, not enough to feel confined, only enough to ask for a gentler pace. Low leaves soften its edges. A few pale blossoms lean near. Moonlight touches the stone in broken shapes, then fades where branch shadow lies across it. Nothing beyond this point feels large. The garden no longer spreads around you in separate spaces. It feels gathered now, as though all its paths, pools, walls, trees, fruit, and flowers have gradually been drawing closer to one quiet center. You follow the curve without hurry. The air remains mild and unmoving. Flower and leaf remain in it. A faint sweetness lingers beneath them. The coolness from the pool has not entirely left. Now and then, the path seems almost to disappear between shadow and silver light. Then it appears again. A pale line appears, then a smooth stone edge, then a softer turn between branches. That gentle uncertainty does not make the way harder to follow. It makes it feel dreamlike, as though the garden is no longer leading you by clear markers, but by calm itself. You do not need to look far ahead. It is enough to feel that the path continues. The leaves remain low at either side. The moonlight rests further in. The hush has deepened. After a while, the garden behind you begins to lose its separate shapes. The seat by the wall has softened into memory. The round pool remains somewhere back in the dimness. The hanging blossoms, the fruit court, the arch of branches, the marble bench, the grove, the cypress pool, all of it has become part of the way that led here. What remains now is simpler. A pale path, low leaves, silver light ahead. And as you continue, with the garden no longer feeling wide, but inwardly complete, it becomes clear that the next space waiting for you is not another place to pass through, but the place where the journey itself will finally come to rest. At last, the path opens into the garden's hidden center. Moonlight lies more fully here, though never harshly. It rests across pale stone, low beds of planting, and the quiet open space between them, while trees and walls hold the edges in a softer dimness. You step into it slowly. Nothing larger waits beyond. That is felt at once. This is no longer another turning or threshold. The garden has gathered itself into this final place. Low walls keep the space gently contained. Branches rise at the edges rather than overhead, so more of the sky can be seen here than in the paths behind. White flowers rest low in their beds. Leaves remain still. Somewhere nearby, fruit hangs among darker growth, though it no longer draws the eye first. What draws the eye first is the calm. Open silver light near the center. Soft shadow at the borders. A balance so natural that nothing in the space feels placed to impress. You move a little further in. Pale paving lies beneath your feet in wider stretches than before, broken here and there by planting and the shadow of leaves. Night air rests mild, and even with the scent of flower, leaf, and distant fruit resting, so lightly together that none of them stands apart from the others. No sound rises. No leaf stirs enough to break the stillness. Even the sky above seems gentler here, framed by branch and wall in a way that makes it feel closer and quieter than the open night beyond the garden. You pause for a few breaths. All the earlier places remain behind you, yet none presses forward in the mind. The petal path, the fig wall, the dark pool beneath the cypress, the fruit grove, the marble bench, the branch arch, the round pool, the moonlit wall, all of them seem to have been leading by degrees towards this one open, hidden calm. Nothing asks to be understood. Nothing asks to be admired. This place only asks to be entered gently and allowed to gather around you. And standing there in the innermost moon garden, with silver light resting low across the paving, and the darker edges held by leaf, flower, and wall. You feel the journey change at last from movement into arrival, as though the garden has brought you to the one place where it has been ready all along to let rest begin. Near the center of the moon garden stands a single tree. You notice it gradually rather than all at once. First the trunk, pale on one side where the moon has touched it. Then the leaves holding small silver edges against the dark. Then the fruit hanging quietly among the branches and resting in a few fallen shapes below. You move towards it slowly. The paving remains smooth beneath your feet. Night air rests lightly on the skin. Nothing in the garden asks for haste now. Closer in, the tree begins to gather the whole space around it. Low walls remain at the edge of sight. Flowers lie lower to the ground. The open sky is still there above, though the branches draw part of it into softer pieces. At the base of the trunk, a few fruits lie where they have fallen. One rests half in shadow. Another catches a narrow curve of moonlight. A third is almost hidden among leaves and darker earth near the roots. Nothing has been gathered away, and that suits the garden. The tree has been left as it is, with fruit still hanging above and fruit already settled below, and because of that, the garden feels calmer rather than less tended. It feels trusted. You pause beside it. The bark is quiet in the moonlight, textured but not rough-looking from where you stand, with one side brighter and the other deepening into shade. Above, the leaves hold their stillness. The fruit remains dark except where the moon finds one rounded edge and leaves the rest to shadow. The scent is faint but clear enough when you stop moving. A little sweetness from the fruit, a little greenness from the leaves, the mild breath of earth close around the roots. Nothing stands apart from anything else. The tree does not dominate the garden, it steadies it. Standing there, you begin to feel the whole moon garden held in relation to this one rooted stillness. The paving, the flowers, the low walls, the open sky, the silver light resting quietly where it can. The journey no longer feels like a path leading from one place to another. It feels gathered here. You remain for a few breaths. Fruit hangs above while more rests below, and the leaves keep their pale edges in the moonlight. And beside that central tree, with ripeness, shadow, and silver light held in such quiet balance, Persephone's presence is felt once more not as something spoken aloud, but as something living in the garden itself, in growth, in stillness, and in the calm beauty of what has been allowed to come fully into its own. Not far from the tree, a low bed of flowers opens beside the path. They grow close to the ground, pale beneath the moon, with petals that seem to gather light rather than reflect it. Some are fully open. Others are only beginning, their shapes still half folded in the softer shadow below the leaves. You move beside them slowly. The air changes here in the gentlest way. Until now, the garden has carried leaf, fruit, watered earth, and cool stone. Here, a floral sweetness begins to rest more clearly in the air, though never strongly. It stays low, close to the bed itself, as though the flowers have no wish to send it far beyond the place where they open. Moonlight lies across the petals in quiet patches. One flower catches more silver than the next. Another remains dimmer, half hidden by leaf shadow. A few petals lean towards the path, while others face inward, keeping their brightness close to the darker leaves around them. Nothing in the bed feels arranged for display. That is part of what makes it restful. The flowers do not stand in rows. They gather in soft clusters, opening where they have room, resting where stem and leaf have carried them. Their whiteness gives the garden a gentler center, not brighter than the fruit, and shadow around it only softer. You pause there for a few breaths. The scent remains light. The petals remain still. The leaves around them hold the moon in broken edges and quiet darks. Near the border, smooth stones mark the shape of the bed without drawing attention to themselves. Beyond them, pale paving continues through the moon garden, though the flowers make the ground feel less like a path now, and more like a place where rest has already begun to gather. Seen from here, the central tree feels calmer still. Its fruit remains above and below in dark, rounded shapes. The low walls stay pale at the edges of the garden. The open sky remains overhead, but the flowers draw your attention lower, closer, into scent, petal, and the softness of things opening only at night. You do not need to stay long. It is enough to stand beside them and let their presence settle. And as you move on from that low bed of night flowers, with their pale petals holding moonlight close and their fragrance resting quietly in the air, the whole garden seems a little more prepared for sleep, as though these blossoms had opened not only for beauty, but to soften the last part of the journey into rest. Beyond the flowers, the resting place comes into view. It does not stand apart from the garden. It seems to belong to it. A low stone couch rests beneath the branches, simple in shape, with pale linen laid across it, and moonlight touching the cloth in quiet silver along one folded edge. Leaves reach above without closing over the sky completely, so that the space feels sheltered, though never shut in. You move towards it slowly. The paving is smooth here. The air remains mild. The scent of flowers stays low behind you, while fruit and leaf linger more faintly around the tree. Nothing here asks to be admired. The resting place is not there to draw the eye in the way a fountain or carved gate might. It waits in a calmer way than that, as though it has been part of the moon garden all along, and has only gradually revealed itself now that the path is no longer asking to be followed. Closer in, the stone beneath the linen shows itself more clearly. Its surface is pale where the moon reaches it, and dimmer below, with the cloth softening its edges and taking away any hardness the eye might otherwise expect. One corner of the linen lies smooth against the stone. Another falls in a quiet fold. Nothing looks freshly arranged. Everything looks settled. You pause beside it. Above, the branches hold the night in broken pieces. A few leaves catch silver. A darker cluster keeps its shadow. Beyond them, the sky remains visible in small, calm openings. One hand may rest lightly on the linen if you wish. The fabric feels cool where the moon has touched it, though not cold. Beneath it, the stone keeps its steadiness. Around it, the garden remains perfectly at ease with itself. The central tree not far away, the flowers low and pale, the walls keeping their distance at the edge of sight. The garden itself has not changed. What changes is the feeling of the journey. Up to this point, every path has led further inward. Every pause has been followed by another turn, another opening, another deeper place. Here, that quiet movement begins to loosen. The garden no longer feels as though it is leading you somewhere. It feels as though it has brought you here. You remain there for a few breaths. Moonlight rests on the linen. Leaf shadow lies across the paving. The stillness above and the stillness below seem to meet around the resting place without effort, and standing beside that low stone couch beneath the branches, with pale cloth, mild air, and the moon garden gathered softly around it, you feel that nothing further needs to open now except rest itself. You pause beside the stone couch before lying down. By now, the garden has stopped feeling like a series of places. The paths, walls, flowers, fruit, and moonlit paving have all softened into one quiet setting around the resting place, so that nothing ahead asks to be followed. When you sit, the linen takes your weight first. It feels cool where the moon has touched it, and a little softer where leaf shadow has kept it dim. Beneath the cloth, the stone keeps its calm firmness. One hand rests naturally on the fabric. If the other touches the edge of the couch, the surface feels smooth and faintly cooled by the night air. From here, the whole garden seems to draw closer without pressing in. The central tree remains near enough to steady the space. The flowers lie low and pale beyond it. Fruit hangs quietly among the darker leaves. Around the edges, the low walls keep the outer night far enough away that it no longer matters. The air has settled as much as the light has. Flower, leaf, fruit, and stone no longer come to notice one by one. They rest together in one mild atmosphere around the couch and the paving beneath it. Even the moonlight has become quieter here, lying across the stone in pale shapes that calm the eye rather than calling it onward. You remain seated for a little while. The journey behind you has already begun to lose its separate stages. The gate, the orchard paths, the white flowers, the basin, the shaded wall, the dark pool, the grove, the marble bench, the fruit court, and the round pool all remain, though no longer as places the mind needs to walk through again. They have become part of the calm that brought you here. What matters now is simpler. The linen beneath your hand, the steady support of the couch, the mild air on your face, and the quiet sense that the garden is no longer leading you further inward, but beginning, at last, to hold you still. You stay there for a few more breaths, and the pause deepens naturally until it feels like the last easing before rest. After a little while, sitting gives way to something quieter. You turn towards the resting place and draw back a fold of linen. Moonlight lies across one edge of the cloth. Shadow rests over another. Between them, pale stone keeps its cool, steady calm. When you lower yourself at last, movement is slow and unforced. Linen meets your hands first, then your shoulders, then your back and legs, until all of you is received by that long, low couch beneath branches and open sky. From this lower angle, everything changes softly. Branches no longer seem above you in quite the same way. They gather instead around small pieces of sky. Leaves hold silver at their edges. Fruit hangs darker between them, quiet and still. Air rests more lightly on your face here. A faint sweetness remains from flower, and fruit, though softer now, settled into night rather than drifting through it. Nearer than anything else is a mild coolness from stone and linen, touched by moonlight where cloth has caught it. Nothing ahead asks for attention. No path waits. No gate opens. No further turning lies beyond this one. All through this garden, one place has followed another with patient calm. Now that movement has ended. What remains is arrival. You make one small adjustment to settle more comfortably. Cloth smooths beneath your hand. One shoulder eases. A little more weight sinks into stillness. Seen from here, the moon garden feels less like somewhere you entered, and more like somewhere already prepared to hold you. Low walls remain at a gentle distance. Flowers keep their pale hush near ground level. Central tree stands nearby, rooted and quiet, with dark fruit above and below. Overhead, sky appears only in calm fragments between leaf and branch. Breath begins to slow without effort. Linen warms where it touches skin. Stone keeps its steady support beneath. Moonlight stays where it has fallen, and nothing in the air or leaves asks the body to remain alert. You lie there for a few breaths more, feeling mild night around you and garden gathered close in silver, scent, shadow, and stillness. Rest has begun. Lying there, you begin to notice how moonlight rests in the branches above. It does not pour down in one wide sheet. It arrives in small, quiet pieces. A silver edge on one leaf, a pale shape caught between two branches, a softer brightness resting where open sky shows through for a moment and then gives way again to shadow. Nothing overhead feels restless. Leaves remain almost perfectly still, and because of that, moonlight seems steadier here than it did while you were walking through the garden. Up on your feet, every path and turning altered what could be seen. From this resting place, light no longer leads you onward. It simply stays where it has fallen. Branches hold that light gently. Some gather close enough to make a kind of shelter above you. Others part just enough to leave small openings of sky, so that open night is present without ever feeling wide or distant. What lies overhead feels softened by leaf and branch made quieter by their nearness. A little shadow lies across the linen. Another falls across pale stone nearby. Silver catches one curve of fruit higher up, then leaves it dark again. All of it remains calm and balanced. Nothing asks to be followed with your eyes. Nothing changes quickly enough to pull you outward. Instead, gaze begins to rest where it is, moving only a little between branch, moonlight, and those small pieces of sky held in between. Even that slight movement grows quieter after a while, until looking becomes less like noticing and more like receiving whatever gentle light remains above you. Air stays mild. A faint sweetness from fruit and flowers remains close to the couch, while moonlight above gives the whole garden a paler hush than before. Open sky is still there, yet branches have softened it, so completely that it feels less like vastness and more like a calm roof made of leaves and silver. You lie there for a few more breaths. Moonlight remains caught in the branches. Leaf shadow rests lightly where it has fallen. Sky appears only in small, quiet openings. And with all of it held so softly above you, Midnight Garden begins to feel not only like a place of rest, but like a place already keeping watch over sleep. Close beside the resting place, the night flowers remain open. From where you lie, they are no longer something to walk towards or pause beside. Their pale petals belong to the garden around you now, resting low in the moonlight and giving off the faintest sweetness into the still air. That fragrance does not arrive strongly. It lingers near the ground and near the couch, light enough that it never takes over the space. Flower, leaf, fruit, and night-cooled stone have settled together, so gently that no single note stands apart for long. After a while, the scent feels less like something drifting through the garden and more like part of the calm already gathered there. Moonlight reaches the petals in uneven touches. Some hold a soft silver brightness. Others remain half veiled by leaf shadow. A few seem almost to disappear until the eye adjusts and finds them again among darker leaves. Nothing about them feels arranged. That is part of their softness. They open where they have opened, and the garden keeps them exactly so, with no movement in the air to disturb their shapes or carry their fragrance away too quickly. Even their whiteness feels quiet here, gentled by the hour and by the stillness resting over everything around them. Lying there, you notice how close the scent remains. It does not rise sharply. It stays near the couch, near the paving, near the low bed where the flowers rest open to the night. Because of that, the whole garden seems lower and softer than before, as though rest has gathered not only in moonlight and shadow, but in the very air close to the ground. Your breathing eases into it without effort. Each breath seems to meet a little of that faint sweetness and let it pass through quietly, without calling attention to itself. Nothing changes suddenly. The fragrance simply remains, light and patient, while the garden grows calmer around you. And as you lie beneath the branches, with pale flowers open nearby, and their scent resting low in the mild night air, the moon garden seems to deepen once more into stillness, not by becoming emptier, but by letting everything delicate remain exactly where it is. Not far above you, fruit still hangs among the leaves. From where you lie, it is seen differently now. While walking through the grove, it appeared branch by branch, one curve catching the moon, another disappearing into shade. Here, resting beneath the tree, you no longer notice it in separate glimpses. It belongs to the whole garden at once, dark and still among the leaves, part of the quiet abundance gathered overhead. Moonlight reaches it sparingly. A rounded edge brightens for a moment. A stem appears, then softens back into shadow. Most of each fruit remains dark, held close by leaf and night. That restraint suits the garden. Nothing shines too clearly. Nothing asks to be looked at for long. Fruit remains where it has ripened, suspended among the branches with a calm weight that feels settled rather than heavy. Leaves surround it in dim silver and soft darks, and because no breeze stirs them, the whole tree seems to hold itself in perfect stillness above the resting place. A faint sweetness lingers in the air, not enough to separate itself from the flowers, not enough to stand apart from leaf, earth, and stone, only enough to deepen the sense that everything here has ripened quietly and been left undisturbed. Seen from below, the branches feel steadier than before. They no longer shape a path. They no longer guide you inward. They simply remain, holding fruit, shadow, and small fragments of moonlight in a pattern that no longer needs movement to complete it. That changes the feeling of the garden once again. Earlier, fruit belonged to the journey. It marked terraces, groves, and hidden courts. Now it has become part of rest itself. Dark forms above, pale linen below, still air between them. Nothing more is needed. You lie there for a few breaths, with the fruit hanging motionless among the leaves and the moon touching it only in quiet fragments, and the whole garden seems richer for keeping, so much of itself in shadow, as though calm has deepened not by losing anything, but by allowing ripeness, fragrance, and night to remain gently gathered together. From where you lie, the low walls around the moon garden begin to matter more, not because they stand high, not because they shut anything out. They simply hold the edges of the space with quiet certainty, keeping the garden gathered around you while the wider night remains at a gentle distance beyond. Moonlight rests along parts of the stone. Some stretches are pale and clear. Others soften into shadow where leaves lean near or branch shadow falls across them. Nothing about those boundaries feels harsh. They do not close the garden in. They give it shape. Beyond them, the night continues. Open sky remains above. Darkness lies further out beyond leaf and wall, yet none of that reaches you sharply here. Fruit, flowers, paving, branches, and still air all remain within a calmer circle, as though the garden has been held just deeply enough to let rest gather without interruption. That changes the feeling of the resting place. Sky is still present, air still moves nowhere. Moonlight still touches leaf and linen, yet the world beyond no longer matters in the same way. What matters is nearer. Stone at the edges, branches above, flowers low to the ground, the steady couch beneath you. Everything feels open but protected. You lie there and let that feeling settle. Nothing needs guarding against. Nothing needs to be kept watch for. Low walls, quiet planting, and the soft reach of branches have already done enough to draw the garden into itself. Because of that, rest comes more easily. Breath slows a little further. Shoulders loosen. The open night remains where it belongs, beyond the pale boundary of stone, while this inner place keeps its own calm close. After a few breaths, even those boundaries seem to soften. They remain where they are, but no longer ask to be noticed directly. Their presence is felt through what they allow: mild air, silver light, still flowers, dark fruit, and the sense of being held in one quiet place between earth and sky. And lying there within that low-walled garden, with moonlight touching the stone and the larger night resting gently beyond it, you feel how completely the world has fallen back, leaving only this sheltered calm for rest. Lying there beneath the branches, you begin to feel your breathing change. Nothing causes it suddenly. No thought makes it happen. No effort is needed. Rest has simply gathered for long enough that the body begins to follow it. Breath moves a little more slowly now. Air enters and leaves without hurry. Linen rests lightly against your skin. Night air touches your face with the same mild softness it has held all through the garden. Around you, nothing asks for alertness. Moonlight remains where it has fallen. Fruit hangs quiet among the leaves. Flowers keep their faint sweetness close to the ground. Low walls hold the garden in its gentle enclosure. Because nothing changes, the body no longer feels the need to keep watch. A little more weight settles into the couch. One shoulder eases. The muscles along your back loosen almost without your noticing. Even your hands seem quieter now. They rest where they have settled, no longer needing to adjust the cloth or touch the edge of the stone. What mattered before path, turning, threshold, arrival has faded into something much simpler. Breath, linen, mild air, stillness, that is enough. Above, branches keep their soft pattern against the sky. No leaf stirs enough to draw the eye. No sound rises from beyond the garden. Everything remains exactly calm enough for the body to trust it. And because it can be trusted, breathing slows again. Each breath seems to belong a little less to effort and a little more to rest itself, as though the garden has made a quiet rhythm and your body has begun naturally to settle into it. You lie there for a while longer, feeling the couch beneath you, the air above you, and the mild hush all around. Nothing needs to be released. Nothing needs to be solved. Nothing needs to happen next. Beneath the branches, with moonlight held in leaves above and faint flower scent resting low nearby, the whole garden has become calm enough for your breathing to grow slow, easy, and almost as quiet as the night itself. By now, the garden no longer feels like somewhere you entered. It feels like what remained after every gate, path, pool, branch, flower, and pause had done its work and fallen gently into place around you. Nothing more is needed. Moonlight still rests in the leaves above, though more softly now. A faint sweetness lingers near the flowers. Dark fruit remains among the branches. Low walls keep the outer night at a kind distance. Linen has warmed where it meets your skin, and the stone beneath it continues to hold you with calm, quiet steadiness. Yet none of these things stands apart for long. They have settled into one atmosphere: silver light, mild air, leaf shadow, stillness, even that is felt more than named. Breathing has become so easy that it no longer seems separate from the garden around you. It moves through the same calm that rests in the branches, in the flowers, in the low walls, and in the open pieces of sky above. Nothing interrupts it. Nothing asks it to change. The whole moon garden has grown gentle enough to receive it exactly as it is. All through the journey, one hidden space opened into another. A gate led to a path led to flowers, flowers led to water, water led to fruit, to shade, to moonlit courts, to deeper and quieter places. Now all of that has softened into one resting place beneath the branches. What once felt like a journey now feels like shelter. What once felt like arrival now feels like belonging. The garden is no longer something around you. It is the calm in which you are lying. Above, leaves hold the moon in quiet fragments. Nearby, flowers keep their pale softness close to the ground. Beyond them, fruit and shadow remain where they have ripened and settled. Nothing has been taken away. Nothing has been brightened. Nothing has been made to speak louder than the rest. That is why sleep comes so gently here, not from outside the stillness, from within it. It rises little by little from mild air, cooled stone, softened fragrance, and silver light resting where it fell. It rises from the long quiet of the garden itself, until wakefulness loosens almost without your noticing, and thought begins to thin into something softer and more distant. For a little while longer, you rest between earth and sky, held by linen, branch, moonlight, and the calm beauty of the midnight garden. Then even that feeling begins to fade. No path remains to follow. No threshold remains to cross. Only the last quiet easing of body into rest, and the sense of the whole garden keeping watch in the gentlest possible way while you drift softly and completely into sleep.